Committee of the whole is called to order. Being that we don't have a quorum, we will go back to recess till we reach a quorum. Thank you. Committee of the whole is called to order. We will now proceed with Senator Tony Etta. Sir, you have some questions that you had posed to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. I think you've got the answer. And
Yes, thank you,
may now
Mr. Chairman.
continue.
Thank you, Director Shimizu, for this breakdown here. And I do have the outstanding tax receivables from Department of Revenue and Taxation. The only thing it didn't show here was what was collected over the same time period. Do you know what was collected?
Right, so I only have the outstanding AR, yes, I do not have the collections amount for the period, but the collections amount period, for the period is really what's in the CRER. So those are the collected amounts.
So any of the collected amounts that are reflected, does that also reflect into the budget that was submitted?
So regarding the, and I don't know if Director Carlson has any comments on that, but if there were any outstanding payables, or sorry, outstanding receivables from the period that were due, those will also be reflected in what we see as the collections during the year. Yes, they're not separated.
Okay, thank you, Director Shimizu. The other question I have, perhaps maybe Director Byrne can answer this. You know, over the weekend, my phone was actually going with this commercial from the Office of the Governor about the teacher pay. Director Byrne, have all the teachers been given their pay raises?
Thank you, Senator. As you know, the teachers are paid by GDOE, so I don't have visibility into what they're doing, but I believe that to be the case.
Okay, so then perhaps maybe you can help me with this. The letter that or the memo that was drafted from Department of Administration to the Governor of Guam, representing the teachers' pay raises, and here you got the recommendations, and the Governor signed it as well. Effective next pay period beginning 5/23/2022 of 20%, but the recommendation that DOA had given was 16%. Do you know what the difference there was? The governor didn't go with your recommendation?
The governor can reach her own conclusions.
No, I understand it, Mr. Burns. I'm just asking, what was your communication with the governor on this issue? I mean, did you recommend to the governor that she sticks with the 16%, or was this something that she did on her own, representing 20% that she wrote here?
Well, you spoke again before I finished what I was saying, or about to say. The governor can reach her own recommendations, and that is indeed what she did. We recommended 16% based upon the numbers that you have in front of you. She advised me that after discussions with, I believe, the then superintendent, she was going to approve a 20% increase.
So then, on the next page here, you have it that an increase of 20% would be required to move all pay grades to the market average, the 50 percentile. The annual cost of such increase is estimated at $30,412,586. Is this represented in the substitute budget that we currently have?
The second part of the question I'm going to refer to Mr. Guerrero, but the 20, you're absolutely right. The 20% represented the 50% percentile. I believe the 16% represented a 35% percentile. But the second part is a matter that was constructed by Mr. Guerrero, so I'm going to leave the answer to him.
Mr. Guerrero, does this substitute budget represent the 30 million from DOE, represent the 30,412,586 in it already, or not? It hasn't been. It hasn't been placed into the DOE budget as represented on the.
Senator, the amount that you're quoting of the $30,400 million is not the number that's reflected in the budget. Upon consulting with GDOE over the last couple of weeks, it was determined initially when we first got this, it could be as high as $33 million. They have since scaled that down to about a little over $26 million. And that amount is reflected in the FY23 budget for the salary increase for the teachers.
So it is reflected in this budget, GDOE's budget in the substitute bill.
You're correct.
Okay. And I know in the 2022 Budget Act, it authorized for the governor to submit no later than September 30, a plan to the speaker, an implementation plan to the speaker. So by September 30, 2022, I'm just trying to figure it out. How did the teachers get their pay raises, or they did not get their pay raises? Because as the commercial from the office of the governor, and last I checked, you did say it's her prerogative, but does she know whether the teachers got their pay raise or not? Because teachers that I've spoken to have said they did not receive any pay increases.
Well, it was certainly my impression, and like I said earlier, I believe it was the governor's impression, otherwise I presume she wouldn't have said it in a commercial or any other place, that the teachers did receive their pay increase at the time that was scheduled.
At the time, since May
23rd, yes.
May 23rd, since the signing of this, no, for the May 23rd, 2022 pay period, right?
Yes, sir. That's certainly my impression. And if somebody at DOE didn't get paid, they need to raise it with their payroll department.
Let's see. How was the pay raise for the teachers implemented? Was it by executive order?
No, sir.
So how did the governor implement the pay raise?
It was established under the Guam Competitive Wage Act of 2014.
But that was only to implement a plan. But was there any authorization to implement?
I'm looking at the memo of May the 11th. It says the Educator plan was established and implemented in 2014. So previously it was implemented under that act. I don't know of a reason why it wouldn't be so implemented today.
It just says the Public Law 3654, Chapter 11, Section 18 authorizes the Governor of Guam to submit no later than September 30, 2022, an implementation plan, which I don't recall ever receiving an implementation plan from the
Senator,
office of the governor.
Sorry, I was referring to the preceding paragraph.
So we're not sure then under what authorization that the governor have to execute the pay raise.
I think I'm sure. I'm not sure if you're sure.
What was that?
I think I'm sure. I'm not sure if you're sure.
Well, that's really a smart aleck comment there, Mr. Byrne. I'm just asking you. I mean, we don't sit here to ask questions of the administration to come back with, very arrogant remarks. I mean, Mr. Byrne, I'm not here to butt against you. I'm just asking questions because, unlike you, Mr. Byrne, you don't go out there and get questioned by the community as to why things are being done or not done. Now, I don't take that comment from you too kindly. And I think it is really uncalled for. We're here to discuss this budget matter, which you have a fiduciary responsibility to answer these questions that come from every single one of us legislators. Now, if you find me now upset, yes, I am. Because we're trying to come down to why this budget is today. Because are you going to be here 5 years from now, or 3 years from now, or 2 years from now, trying to explain to the public why our government is bankrupt should things not pan out? It's going to be my children and my grandchildren and myself to answer to everyone else. Because I'm sitting here as a legislator that should have asked the questions that probably I didn't ask or wasn't answered properly, because you had time to go back and give a smart aleck remark instead of giving the proper answers. You know, I don't need a comment from you, Mr. Byrne.
Well, that's
No, I don't. Mr. Chairman, I don't need a comment from Mr. Byrne. We're trying to come here today to get the answers so that we can move with a responsible budget. Is that too much to ask? I have no further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Etta. Senator Tello, do you have any questions for the panel?
Before we start my time on this, Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank Senator Terlahi for offering me his time. So if you want to look at him, he's provided me his time.
What was that?
Senator Terlahi has offered me his time. He's not going to be having any questions any second round, so he's offered me his time.
You want to tell the chair that he's offering his time?
Well, it's okay. Let him speak for himself.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
thank you,
exactly
Mr. Chair.
right.
Let him speak
Senator
for yourself.
Tello, I was going to ask him just
Sure, I was
ask
just-
that. Senator Terlahi, did you want to make a statement before we begin with Senator Taidui?
Senator Tello asked me if she can get, fill in for my turn, because I don't have anything to say.
Are you yielding your time to Senator Taidui?
I'm yielding my time to Senator
All
Tello,
right,
sir.
thank you. Senator Taidui, you have 20 minutes. All right?
But before I get started, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a comment that there are 3 branches of government. I'm sure Mr. Burns or Lester or anyone else in the administration doesn't speak to the governor the way that they speak to us here, or a judge. We're just as part of an equal branch, the checks and balances, and we ask for that same respect you give to the other branch of government, that you give that same respect here in this body. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to just comment.
All right, please begin.
This question is for OFB. OFB, can you tell me how much general fund revenue has been set aside in FY22 budget? Before the 106, before Public Law 106.
If we're talking about gross revenues, Senator?
Yeah, the one at the very top.
Yeah, the gross revenue is 706, 866, $659.
Okay, thank you. Steve, can you tell me how much it is now with that Bill Public Law 106 has now been implemented? How much that is now?
If you take away the provisions for tax refunds, so
No, not the top one. The same where you got the 706. How much is it now?
what is it? It's based on the amended law. Yes, it's 765 million, $10,882.
So what's the difference? What is that increase total?
That increase is $58,144,223.
So this money was, this increase is that amount. Thank you for that. So we'll remember that. That's 58,144,223 that was increased. Okay.
To BBMR, were you able to get a copy of the CRER draft, at least a draft, since, you know, it's due on Friday, but it would have been nice to have it today? Were you able to do that?
Still working on it, Senator.
Do you know when we can get that?
Certainly by the end of the week.
Okay, so we can't seem to get a draft like you provided in the past for us, okay?
We're putting notes, as I mentioned, so it's a little different.
Since you had a chance to look at it, Lester, can you tell us, is it still around the $99 million marker as far as excess revenue?
After the actions of the body in passing 36106, that number is reduced.
Okay, thank you. Have you also, to BBMR as well, have you also taken 25 million from the LEAP and also taken that out of the excess revenue, the 99 million?
It's shown as a general fund appropriation from 22.
But are you taking it from excess revenue? Because it's all accounted for. The 785 has been accounted for, so you have to take the money for the LEAP from somewhere. Did you take it from FY22 excess revenue? Are you anticipating that? Or did you take it from FY21 excess revenue?
We did not take it from FY21. We're counting it against FY22.
Okay, thank you. Lester, also, with the liquid fuel tax, is that also incorporated in the excess FY22?
Yes,
And is that 1.2 or is that 5 million?
it's 5 million.
Okay, thank you. So if you can do the math, 58,144,223, 25 million for the LEAP, 5 million for liquid fuel. What is the total of that? Steve, can you give me the total of those numbers?
Senator Tideway, you're asking them to do the math of the numbers you just gave?
Okay, if you want, I can do it myself if you
Yeah,
want.
yeah,
That's
just-
88,144,223. Okay. It was mentioned earlier, Lester, about some shortfalls in the special fund for FY22. Of course, we have 3 more months to go. So what is the estimated shortfall that it will be in FY22 for special funds? I'm sorry, can you turn your mic? Thank you.
The last report, and I think it was mentioned during our discussions on this bill, it's about 5 million, but if you recall, the beginning of the fiscal year towards, and even as far as January, it was tracking 9 to 10 million. So it's starting to look a little bit better, but it is still running short.
Okay, so
And it will be inherently short also by the bold actions taken by the body to reduce liquid fuel tax.
okay. Steve, what are you coming up to in this budget bill on special fund shortfalls for FY22? What is your estimate? Right now, I think, Lester, you mentioning about 10 million. Is that what you said, Lester, or is it 5? I wasn't quite sure. Could you verify again, please?
Yeah, what I mentioned was, as of the last special fund report, the major categories were more like 5 million, but they were 10 million short earlier in the year. So getting better.
Okay. Steve, what is the amount you're calculating?
What we're tracking, Senator, right now, I believe as of the June CER report, is roughly about 7.3 million.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought I heard that last week. So the special funds is at 7 million. So we're going to add that to the list of all those expenditures, okay? And we're going to add that up, and it comes out to 95,144,223. If I'm not mistaken, that is special fund shortfall, the GPA 58 million, LEAP 25 million, $5 million for fuel tax. That is a total of 95,144,223. So you take 99. Can you pause while I add, because I'm supposed to add by myself now. So 99 million minus the 95,144 already we're spending of excess revenue for FY22. A day we come up with 194,140. I think, wait, let me do that again. Sorry. No, stand by, because my computer is deciding to. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Just to make sure, I don't want to misrepresent the numbers here, because we are in budget, so 99, boom, boom, boom. So 99 million minus 95,144,223. We have $3.8 million left. 3.85, and we still have 3 more months to go on the CRER report to come out to kind of tell us where we are as far as any kind of expenditures. 3.8 million left after all those expenses. That's something we all need to think about. Once again, just for my colleagues who weren't listening, who might want to hear it again, it's 7 million for special fund shortfall, 58,144 for GPA, LEAP 25 million, 5 million liquid fuel tax, total 95,144,223, leaving a balance of only $3.8 million left.
Senator Tadegui?
Yes, sir.
By back of the napkin math,
Yep. Okay.
based on the June numbers,
Based on the what numbers?
the June numbers,
Okay.
the 99 million,
Mm-hmm.
if we take the 26 million for GPA, the 13 million for the 2% rainy day, the 15 million additional rainy day, 3.1 million for GMH because of the pharmaceutical fund, and then we take LEAP, Public Works, LEAP is 25 million,
Wait,
Public Works is
Lester,
5.
let me interject
I come
here.
out with 24.6.
Let me interject here. Go back to the 58,144,223 that we increased in the bill Public Law 106. It was 15 million plus 13 million for the rainy day, plus 3 million for pharmaceutical, and then 26 million. That came up to 58,144,223. That's what I have here. I mean, you want to try again and see where I'm missing here? Because that's exactly what it comes out to, 58, and that's exactly what we increased the revenues to. So we had to get that money from somewhere, and the reason why it was increased was because they were saying the CRER is tracking more revenue than what we projected. And you guys were coming to us saying $99 million is being projected in the CRER of excess revenue. So if you look, GPA 26,381,000, pharmaceutical 3,196,49, rainy day 15 million, that's a total of 44, and then the rainy day fund at 13,575,774. That's 58 million.
Yeah, yes, it is. And you
Okay.
increased the revenues by the commensurate $58 million.
Yes, we did.
Yes,
And and like you said, you're adjusting the CRER to reflect that.
that's correct.
Okay. So once again, that leaves this body with only $3.8 million. We have 3 months more to go for the CRER, not even knowing what's in the future.
Senator, once we netted out the actions of the body in 36106, that number that used to be 99 comes down to like over 50. When we take in the $30 million for LEAP, Public Works, and mass transit, we have a net unobligated projected general fund revenue balance, a readjusted June, of 24.6. If you want to cover special funds from the 24.6, then that's $7 million off of that.
Yep, and then you also incorporated the liquid fuel tax at 5 million, is that correct too?
Yes, I
Okay.
already counted for that.
Yeah, and in FY21 excess revenue, what we were told was that 20 million was used for shortfalls for special funds. Is that true? I think Mr. Burns brought that up, about $20 million worth of shortfalls in FY21 at the end of the year, and you used excess revenue of FY21 to cover that, correct?
In 21?
Yes, yes.
I
Okay.
think you're referring to 22 here.
Right, no, I'm talking about 21. You know, you did it in 21, and now we're here coming into 23, but, 22 excess revenue is anticipated to cover the shortfalls. And that's $7 million. I mean, that's what we know today, but it's probably it may be more, it may be less, but it's best to be conservative more than it is to overspend. In Public Law 3673, using excess this is for Mr. Byrne. Public Law 3673 is actually the war claims bill that appropriated $10 million from FY21 excess revenue. Also, in the bill itself, there's a section that says, and allows the governor, and it says, can be reimbursed by Section 30 funds. So after you've utilized the excess revenue of $10 million, the bill allows you to reimburse yourself, wherever you took it from Section 30 money for FY23. Does the administration plan on taking $10 million out of Section 30 for this year to reimburse themselves? Because the law gives you that authority. So my question is, are you going to be doing that?
That's a budget question, so I'm going to refer it to my colleague here.
I would not recommend doing that if we're taking the anticipated Section 30 for 23 operations.
You wouldn't recommend, but is there any plans?
I would not recommend that if we are using the 74.9 million for 2023 operations.
You might not recommend it, but is the governor planning on taking that money out of the Section 30 to cover some reimbursement? I mean, she could easily take that $10 million and put it in the general fund and start spending it. So, it's something we need to know. You told me you wouldn't recommend, Lester. I'm just asking the governor, unless you're speaking for her.
Not me.
I'm sorry?
I am not speaking for the governor.
Okay, so we need to be conscious of that $10 million, because it could be taken out at any time, and actually this body gave her the authority to do so. And if you're looking for the bill, it's Public Law 36-73. For revenue tax, hi Daphne. Daphne, you said that you would have the information regarding the liability, the $19 million tax refund liability. How much of that is income tax, and how much is that the EITC and child tax credit?
So I'm still working on clarifying. I could tell you that at least for the rebate recovery credits, and we focused on the years 2020 and 2021 because those are the years we're going to get some level. We have some funding available to so that way we don't have to be concerned about utilizing the general fund. For the rebate recovery credits, we have a total of about $1.6 million that is included in that $19 million. And that's just for the rebate recovery credits. Senator Titagui, though, I am still clarifying. My team did provide some information for EIC, CTC, and ACTC for years 2020 and 2021. But the numbers, at this point, I've asked some questions because they don't appear as reasonable. So I will have to get back to you on those amounts. But it just at least for the RRC, in terms of what we see in the 19.96 million that's in the refund liability report for July, there's about 1.6 million that will be funded for rebate recovery credits that again, that's part of, if you did not get EIP 1, 2, or 3, you can get reimbursed, you can get that, but you're eligible, you can file your return for 2020 or 2021 and get those payments. So 1.6. And the other information I'm waiting on now, and I will do my best to provide that to you as soon as possible, but the numbers at this time, I don't have accurate numbers right now.
That's really important, to know, because this is a liability. Do we have enough funding to cover any kind of tax refunds at this point? We're not sure. We're not getting answers from the administration with regards to what's in the account. So have you done any update on any reporting for, have you done any analysis on anticipated new tax revenues coming to government of Guam? Like new shopping centers coming up, the purchase of new buildings, things like that would generate some revenue for taxes? Has there been a report out?
Regarding some kind of analysis or looking forward to additional revenues, perhaps then I can refer to Director Carlson, maybe on some of the projections and what we may see.
I believe, just taking a drive up north from here, you'll see the new Jack in the Box is open. The Don Quixote has made significant progress. In Barrigada, on my way to the good senator from Barrigada, Frank Blas's village, you'll see a new American grocery coming up. So we have significant outside the fence, and I'm just talking about those, like, even if we just say Don Quixote and American grocery, that's a whole lot of wholesale effort to stock the shelves, a whole lot of manpower to staff the store, and I can only imagine the inventory from Don Quixote and the staff required to manage that huge store. So aside from the sand chart, the Milcon chart, there are significant local businesses of significant size that are nearing construction.
Do you have that in numbers?
No, because I don't know how many people Don Quixote is going to hire. Neither do I know how many people American Grocery is going to hire. But if you've ever been to the American Grocery in Dedido, just to take a look at what's on the shelves and not including what's in the warehouse, that's a significant investment in the inventory. And of course, the people to manage it and to rotate it out and to sell it.
Do you at least know when they plan on opening so that, this funding into the government?
Looks soon. It'll probably be in the fiscal year 23 because they're putting in glass and American Grocery. It looks like they're about ready to pave.
Daphne, when did you receive the earned income tax credit advance and even advancement? When do you receive that or anticipated to receive for FY22 taxes?
Regarding the EITC monies.
And the child tax credit, you get that in advance, right? You get it in advance?
Right, so we really, when the ARP Act of 2021 authorized the funding of the EITC now permanently for Guam, and also the child tax credit now permanently for Guam, to include the ACTC, which we've already been reimbursed for. Our team discussed with the IRS just for tax year 2021 only how that would work. Now, we have of course, a final kind of a plan with the IRS regarding that. Regarding years going forward for tax years 2022, which of course those are the returns that we will see in fiscal year 2023, I have received, in my communication with the IRS in the past couple of weeks, I've asked them if it's possible to, instead of receiving receiving the monies as a reimbursement, to receive them as an advance. I've been advised that that is likely, although again, we don't have our final, we haven't done our final plan for that, and there's not a final approval from the Treasury yet for that, but it's likely that we'll see it as an advance, and again, that was a request that we have made. Now, we will not likely begin to make payments for 2022 refunds until early next calendar year. So of course I expect that we'll be able to get through discussions with the IRS likely by the end of this calendar year, coming into January at the latest. Generally we begin to receive tax returns around the last few days of January. So I believe we started January 28, 2022, and usually we start receiving around that amount. So more than likely we'll receive it, if we receive it in advance, in around, again, before we start paying, which likely we began paying current year refunds this year on February 25, and of course, you know, we're going to be working to make sure that we provide the estimates that the Treasury needs so that they could provide us the advance ahead of time so that we can definitely receive the monies before, again, we make our first payments for 2022. So we'll have that money in the bank.
So around October, November, because if you're preparing?
So we'll likely finalize our discussions by the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
I'm hoping before December, but again, that is dependent upon the IRS really. We don't have control over that, but we definitely, you know, have open discussions already with them. And as I understand it, they're already discussing what is going to happen for 2022 tax year, the IRS is. So, you know, again, we're just kind of waiting, but we're going to continue to work to discuss that so we could get some finality on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Daphne, for that.
You're
For OFB, I'm going to put our attention now on the $41 million in question costs for federal funds. It was mentioned that 23 million of that is from PUA overpayment, and the remaining is still in question. Has OFB taken that into consideration with regards to that question cost for federal funds?
Senator,
It's about $18 million, and other than the PUA, if I'm not mistaken. I know that the PUA is slowly, you know, being forgiven and certain, but it's going to stop at a certain time on the forgiveness. I don't think it's going to go all the way through until, you know.
to your question regarding the PUA, Senator, no, we did not consider any of that.
Not PUA. The other 18 million of the 41 in question costs for federal funds.
No, Senator, we did not.
Okay, so there's been no consideration of this 18 million. That's more concerning than the PUA because, like I said, it's being forgiven. So let's keep that in the back of our heads too. Regarding the, okay, we asked about the shortfalls and your anticipation. Okay, just curious, Steve, OFB has considered this 25 million LEAP fund basically coming from excess revenue for FY22 excess revenue on the $25 million for the LEAP?
If I'm not mistaken, Senator, the law references the general fund. It did not reference excess. It just says general fund. So I'm assuming that the administration must have identified this money within the general fund to pay for these expenses.
Yeah, we just heard that's their interpretation. They're using excess fund. Okay, I just wanted to verify DOAs, Mr. Byrne. The 35 million for the hospital and the 5 million for DOC. I just wanted to clarify, is this an authorization or an appropriation in your eyes?
It's an appropriation.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. So either DOA or OFB, has there been any review of laws appropriating or authorizing the transfer of general funds which has yet to be implemented but remain an obligation to the government of Guam, use of excess? So you talked earlier, Mr. Byrne, about how, there are prior obligations that have yet to be funded, bills prior. Like, for instance, let me give you one example. We have this one bill that was implemented with covering an account through the ABLE for $250,000. It's an appropriation, I guess, from the general fund when there's funding, things like that. Those bills that even our BJ Cruz has also mentioned that there are quite a bit out there. Have you did an assessment and how much of those bills that were passed that have yet to be appropriated the funds, obligations?
Senator, thank you. In our financial statements, there's a statement of continuing appropriations. So that would be the number as of September 30th, 2021. We will compute it again at September 30th, 2022, and it will be included in the financial statements. But we haven't as yet, in the middle of the financial year, made such a computation.
So you haven't gone back and looked prior laws that were passed that had, I have one here, Public Law 3690, which is the ABLE savings. Like I said, it's $250,000. And there's one that says Public Law 3688, which is WICHE at $78,500. Laws that this body has passed, but it's never been realized or funded. Have you done a spreadsheet to show exactly what that liability is for this government of Guam, for all those bills that were passed but never implemented, which you consider still an obligation?
As I mentioned, for prior years, it's listed in the financial statements. For current year, it's still an ongoing issue, so we haven't made such a computation. One of the examples you mentioned is WICHE, but that amount was paid this year by DOI, so it's no longer an obligation of the government of Guam.
What about the $250,000 for ABLE savings?
That was appropriated to DOA to set up the ABLE savings system, and we're in the process of doing that.
Okay, so we need to add that to the excess revenue of the FY22, correct?
You certainly can take account of it.
Okay, so we can add that
in your assessment
to
of
the
what
list.
has yet to be paid. Yes.
Right, yet to be paid, okay. On the OPA, Mr. Byrne, the OPA audit for FY21 reported, how much is in excess revenue that was projected for FY21 excess revenue, according to the audit?
The audit showed revenues of $105,330,000 in excess of the original budget amount.
Okay, and what was that spent on?
Well, some of it wasn't. Some of it turned into the surplus.
How much is it, then can you tell me what that surplus
before,
is? Let's start with the easiest one. How much is that surplus?
the surplus was $31.5 million.
So that's still sitting in the general fund?
That's still sitting, that is the general fund.
Okay. And what was the remaining?
And about 16 million was spent on special funds. And the remainder was spent on these prior appropriations that we've just been talking about.
Can you, well, you want to mention them, please?
Which prior, I don't have a list of them, but I have some in my head. Like there was a large amount that was paid to the charter schools relating from prior appropriations.
From what? I'm saying again, from the
For the charter schools?
charter schools?
Yes.
Okay.
There was a large amount for public health from prior year appropriations. There was some from DOC. And there was also some from the GPD. But I could go on. Almost every department had prior year appropriations which weren't previously recognized, but now we've recognized them, and where appropriate, they've been paid.
So you're saying 105 million in excess revenue for FY21, and everything has been expended except 31.5 million, which still sits in the general fund.
Yes, may I just clarify this? The
Sure.
105 million includes receivables. It isn't necessarily what was collected. Our financial statements are prepared on an accrual basis, which means that receivables and payables are recognized in the statements.
Then can you tell me what is this 79.2 million that the Office of Public Accountability is claiming is in excess? So you're saying 105, but here on this report, I'm showing 79.2.
Could you refer me to?
Sure, it's on the July 19, 2020, FY21 financial highlights. Mr. Chair, if I can I just take just a minute to show him my document that I have so he can see what I'm talking about?
Okay, we'll call for a short recess. We're at recess at this time. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Senator Titlery, since you had your
Thank you.
conversation with the panel, please continue.
Appreciate the conversation I had, and I just wanted to verify, it was said earlier that there is about 31.5 million, Mr. Byrne, still in excess revenue that has not been spent? Or is it 30.5?
30.5
30.5, sir?
is,
Okay.
is the accumulated
Okay.
fund surplus. So
Okay.
that's, if you want, I suggest you look at it that way.
Okay, so that means it's, we have 31.5 that still has yet to be expended from the FY22 excess revenue. So if I can, Mr. Chair, ask Department of Administration if they can provide an accounting list of all the expenditures used with FY21 excess revenue. So we can find out how much, what was spent.
Yes,
Okay.
Senator. If I could also refer you to page 150 in the financial statements. It shows a breakdown of all the components of the general fund. I will do your list because I think it needs a little interpretation because, as I mentioned before, the financial statements are compiled on an accounting basis, whereas the CRER is done on a cash basis. And for instance, you will see here that the amount that is transferred out to GMH, for instance, in Fund 617, in the financial statements it shows as expenditure, but in the budget and the CRER it's shown as a reduction in revenue. So I will attempt to reconcile that so that you'll be able to, and your colleagues will be able to understand it.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne, because what I've done is I've gone through every bill that appropriated any excess revenue for FY21, and I've come up to 54 million with the $20 million in tax refund, the art funding for GUMA, the 3.5 for historical Simon Sanchez, the Veterans Act of 500, and then the $10 million, as well as the $20 million shortfall for special funds. I didn't put the deficit reduction in there, but that's just some of them, and it's totaling up to 54. So I appreciate to see your list as well. I've accumulated mine, so I appreciate that.
Okay, Senator Titlery, just,
Sure.
Mr. Byrne, is that from the OPA report?
Mr. Chairman, these pages are from the audited financial statements.
Okay, so I don't know if you have access to that, Senator Titlery, but my colleagues, if not, please get access so you can see it.
And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Okay, Senator Titlery.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Mr. Byrne, the 5 million additional expenditures from the Guam Fire Department that was brought to our attention, how is that paid off? What funds were you using to pay that off?
I'm not sure what expenditure that was, but as I mentioned before, if it was a prior obligation or a continuing appropriation, it will have come out of the very revenues that you just quoted.
Mr. Byrne, if I'm not mistaken, this $5 million was over expenditure for FY21, and FY22. It was an over expenditure, and I believe during one of the conversations we had that this money was going to be taken care of within the department. They were able to carry it, or the governor's transfer, but now you're saying it's just taken out of the general fund.
If it's 22, I don't know. It's because I haven't drawn up the financial statements yet.
Can you please send me that information then? Where did the funding come from to pay for that $5 million of additional over expenditures from the GFD? Okay?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to yield my 2 minutes and 30 to my colleague, Senator Frank Blas. The remaining of my 2 minutes and 20.
All right, thank you, Senator Titlery. Senator Blas, you have 12 minutes and 28 seconds, and it starts now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Byrne, I'm going to go back to the discussion you're having with Senator Ratter about the teacher's pay. Or let's go about, the pay increases in general. What constituted or what instituted the law enforcement pay?
Law enforcement pay was constituted by executive order.
Executive order, 2022-01.
Yes.
Okay. What about the pay for law enforcement retirees to come back to work?
We haven't paid that yet.
Yeah, but there was an executive order for that too as well?
Yes, there was an executive order for that.
Okay.
I expect that to happen fairly
Okay.
shortly.
Okay. What about the teacher's pay? How was that executed? Or how was that?
As I mentioned before, the teacher's pay was established under the Guam Competitive Wage Act of 2014.
Okay. Did you receive a copy of this that I passed out? This is an excerpt of Public Law 36-54.
No.
Okay. This is page 126 of Public Law 36-54. Okay, this is actually Chapter 11, Miscellaneous Appropriations, Section 18. And you do me, Mr. Byrne, for the record, can you read Section 18 there, please?
Section 18, it doesn't say what Section 18 of, but it's Section 18, Educator Classification, Compensation, and Benefit Study. The sum of $100,000 shall be allocated from the General Fund appropriation in Section 1 of Part 1 of Chapter 2 for the sole purpose of funding an educator classification, compensation, and benefit study to adjust classified and unclassified educator compensation and classification in fiscal year 22 to be submitted to Imagahan Guahan. The final implemental plan to adjust compensation, classification, and benefits shall be submitted by Imagahan Guahan to the Speaker of the Legislature in Guahan no later than September the 30th, 2022. The implementation of salary increases due from said plan shall be effective on June 30th, 2023, after receipt of the plan by the Speaker of the Legislature in Guahan, unless disapproved or amended.
Okay. Thank you. So, based on Section 18, which is actually an amendment to the Competitive Wage Act, it says here that a plan to adjust the compensation, classification, benefits shall be submitted by the governor to the Speaker. Has that plan been submitted?
Not so far.
It hasn't been submitted. So, let me reference you to your memo dated May 11, 2022. I'm sure you've got that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A couple places. Let's go to page 9. And this was a discussion you had with Senator Ada earlier, and as far as your recommendation for 16%, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let me go back to page 1. Page 1, on your background, in the last paragraph on page 1, you basically recognize Public Law 3664. So you recognized it, right?
It was noted.
Pardon me?
It was noted.
Yeah, it was noted. It's there. Okay? And you do know, right, that Public Law 3664 in this section here, it amended the Competitive Wage Act of 2014.
Senator, I'm sure you're not going to agree with me, but no, I don't.
Well, it does. It does. Okay? That's what it does.
Well,
It amended that.
I guess we respectively have to differ.
Okay, well, this is where it starts to get really edgy, because then we go to the last page, page 11. Okay? And it says that after you sign it, it said it was approved and concurred, along with an amendment that was handwritten, and it says effective next pay period beginning 5/23/2022 at 20%. Whose handwriting is that?
It's the governor's?
The governor's. So this is the governor's signature.
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, what I'm saying here is that despite the law 3654 saying before you can implement any plan or any pay towards teachers, you've got to submit some paperwork to the legislature, which you've said already you haven't submitted anything, for consideration, and that the implementation of the plan for the pay raises is not to be effective until June 30th, 2023. Yet you went ahead, the administration went ahead and did the pay raises, despite what the law says, and whether or not you want to agree or disagree with me as to whether or not, Section 18 is an amendment to the Competitive Wage Act of 2014. Section 18 is the law. It's the law. So despite not wanting to follow the law, you didn't follow the law, and you implemented a plan without any.
So, Senator, I didn't implement the plan. I made a recommendation.
Right.
That is required under Section 4101 of the 4GCA, where it defines the responsibilities of the Director of Administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, please, that what I say here, I say because not only did I swear an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, but I believe this to be the case. We prepared the plan under that codified part of the Guam Code.
Although in your background you did note.
Well, yes, we did note it.
Okay, so in your notation, did anybody advise the governor of what the new law is?
That's a matter that you would have to ask the governor.
Well, I'm asking you because you submitted this on May 11th. She signed this on May 11th, so it's very safe to assume that you were there when this was being discussed.
No, I wasn't there when it was signed.
Oh, okay.
But I would also, point out that the budget law doesn't have the notwithstanding language.
It doesn't need the notwithstanding, because that was the whole intent.
So that's why I maintain that the recommendation was made under Section 4101.
It doesn't need the one notwithstanding. It's the law.
So is Section 4101.
Yeah, but this is now the current law.
But the
3654 was the current law. We're running our whole island, our government operations right now, based on 3654.
Well, I guess we're not
Many
going
of
to
your
agree.
mandates and many of the operations that you and of the finances that you have to help to administer, okay, is dictated and determined by 3654. 3654 is the law of the land when it comes to some certain things, and when it becomes specific to pay raises and compensation.
But 3654, I think I need to remind the senator that the pay raises were paid not with local funds, but were paid with federal funds.
Oh, you're paying it with federal funds.
That I'm not paying it. GDOE paid it with federal funds.
Oh, so if it's paying for federal funds, why are we including it in our general fund?
Because for the new year, it is going to be paid with local funds.
Mr. Grohl. Okay, so they're paying it with federal funds there, but now we're paying it with local funds. What authorization do we have to even consider this? Obviously, and the reason why I'm a precursor to that is, it's been said, we don't have any control of the federal funds. We have control of the local funds now. So absent an order, and absent any plan submitted to the legislature, what authorization do we have to be able to even entertain this?
In your response, Senator, to your question whether or not we should address the issue of funding this salary increase?
No, and my question is, what authorization do we have to even consider it?
The only authorization, Senator, that I am aware of that authorize a salary increase for the teachers is basically a memo, not so much a memo, but a response from the recommendation of Department of Administration Director to the governor to implement this compensated wage increase. And that memo was basically concurred by the governor. And because it was concurred by the governor, I am assuming, like, we recognize the governor's authority to some degree, that is, I believe, maybe sufficient enough. Maybe, I'm beginning, maybe in this case it may not be, but that was sufficient enough for us to go ahead and at least budget for these positions in the FY23. As far as the authority, that could be questioned, but it was in their staffing pattern, and we normally try to address by funding all warm bodies, with maybe one exception this year, which we also addressed earlier, and hopefully we can resolve that issue. But other than that, anything that's showing in a staffing pattern submitted to my office, filled by a warm body, we funded those positions at that level.
Okay. So in the original submission of the budget, when did they originally submit the budget to you?
Are you referring to GDOE?
Yeah.
Or all the agencies?
All agencies.
All the agencies, the budgets came in at different times. I believe they were all submitted to my office, I think no later than the end of April, if I'm not mistaken. But in those budgets that were submitted, again, it was predicated on the ceiling that the governor issued back in the executive budget that was due to my office and submitted to my office on January 31st. So all those budgets that were submitted was based on those levels reflected in the executive budget.
Okay. Great. You familiar with this document here? In your read of this thing, was any of the documents required to be submitted for the legislature for consideration? Did we receive it, or did your office receive it?
Senator, the issue regarding the teachers' salary adjustment pay was not brought up until just recently. And I would say, honestly, maybe in the last 2 weeks at the most. To your question, no, we did not consider it. But we did get an updated staffing pattern from GDOE that included these adjustment in pay salary for all these positions that were affected by that study.
Okay. So, Mr. Byrne, let me go back to you. All provisions in 3654, I guess are there any other provisions in 3654 that you guys decided you're just not going to follow it because you don't need to? I mean, it was clear that you needed to submit a plan. It's clear that the plan has to be submitted to the speaker. And granted that it's, we still have time, it's until September 30, 2022. But it also says there the implementation of the plan of the pay raises is not till June 30th, 2023. By the way, how does 3654 get promulgated? Who has the authority to sign it into law?
It's passed by the legislature
And
and signed by the governor.
signed by the governor. So in her signing that 3654, she acknowledges that this is there. Did you ever bring it up to us?
That's a matter you need to take up with the governor and her legal counsel.
Well, you are the representative that I'm talking to. And you did write the memo here that made note of 3654, section 18.
I did.
Yes. Did anybody even think to even contact the legislature to say that, you know, despite what you guys did in 3654, we're just going to ignore it because we're going to go with CWA 2014?
What, can you please explain what you think?
Yeah,
should
I'm
have
just
happened?
basically saying you do know, you do recognize that 3654, that section 18 of 3654 does exist.
It exists,
Yes.
but wasn't operative because local funds weren't used.
It was what?
Wasn't operative because local funds
It wasn't
weren't used.
operative. Well, is there anything else in 3654 that wasn't operative?
Not that I know.
It's the law of the
of.
land, isn't it?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, but it's the law of the land, isn't it? And the law of the land basically says no matter what, okay, this basically, this says what you need to do.
This says what the governor needs to do. There's a law that I was operating under.
Also, now we're gonna, the governor,
There's a law that I was operating under, what the Director of Administration needs to do.
yeah. And did you think it was your fiduciary responsibility as the director of DOA to inform the governor that section 18, 3654 existed? And that we have to,
Yes, Senator, it's mentioned in the memo.
okay, so you did mention it and you didn't, but nothing happened and now we have to, we're asked to move forward on it.
Move forward on what?
We're asking to move forward on a pay raise that is not supposed to be promulgated, is not supposed to be effective until September or June 30th, 2023.
So you're not going to give the teachers a pay
No,
raise?
no, don't say, don't say, no, I'm not going to give. The teachers had, let's go back to where if the law was followed the way it's supposed to have been followed, this conversation would not be happening. I prefaced a lot of my questions to you because I asked you, how did we promulgate the law enforcement pay? How do we promulgate the law enforcement retirement pay? The only thing I found with regards to teacher pay was a press release.
As I
And
men-
then, all of a sudden, on Facebook, thank God, Facebook is becoming a credible source for news gathering because that's how I was able to get a copy of this memo. It was on Facebook.
Please remember, Senator, that DOA does not pay the teachers' pay. It's paid by GDOE. My duties were carried out by following the Section 4101.
Okay.
The governor signed it. I don't know what GDOA did, except I do know that they were reimbursed with federal funds, so the federal government must feel comfortable with what transpired.
How much of this teacher's pay, how much are we estimating for 2023, Mr. Gurrow, for the FY2023 budget?
What we estimated, Senator, in the FY23 budget is roughly about $26 million.
$26 million. That's a significant amount, right? I mean, that would cause, you said you had to increase the budget by about $17 million to be able to help, right?
That's correct, Senator.
So this would be basically above and beyond the 17, it's $26 million. And in order to be able to move forward on this, I think this body would like some clarity in this matter. Then, Madam Chair, I suggest that we get on recess and call the director, the superintendent of the Department of Education in here to find out. Okay, how do we pay? How was this paid? Under what authority? Because you see, if we can't get past that matter, there's a $26 million savings. And let's cross our T's and dot our I's when it comes to this. So I'm suggesting, Madam Chair, that we take a recess until the superintendent of the Guam Department of Education is able to come down here and answer some of the questions. Thank you very much.
There's been a request to recess. Any objection? We are in recess.
Committee of the Whole is called to order. Before we begin, I'd ask the Sergeant Arms to swear in Superintendent Francis Santos and his staff, Mr. Frank Cooperners. Sergeant Arms?
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay. Mr. Chair, under oath, you may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergeant. My colleagues, we have currently now on the panel, hopefully for a short time, the Superintendent of DOE, Mr. Francis Santos, and his staff, Mr. Frank Cooperners. He was the short-term superintendent. Senator Frank, you had a question you wanted to pose to the superintendent?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, thank you very much. Mr. Cooperners, thank you for being here. Very quick question. I only have 2 minutes and 34 seconds to be able to ask this to you. Are you currently paying your teachers this pay raise that they were supposedly received?
Can you repeat that again,
Are
Senator
you
Voss?
currently paying your teachers or your staff, the GDOE staff, the pay raise that they're supposed to be receiving?
The answer is yes.
Okay, under what authority or what money are you using to be able to pay them?
This particular fund is a federal fund, ARP.
Okay. What about now with the school year just started?
Well, the new school year just started,
Okay.
Senator Frank, and the funding source that we got approval from US DOE is guaranteed or permitted use through September 30th, so technically the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. So what was the process for you to be able to get that approval?
Well, can I just have some, first of all, I'm in an acting capacity, and so is Frank Cooperners here, right? So we get the nominee for being the best actors, and a couple of the other things. I serve at the pleasure of a board, okay, an elected board of directors, GDOE, and Franklin serves at the pleasure of the acting, superintendent in the case of superintendent. So everything that we're talking about here today at this moment was done prior to me accepting this job. I'm now on basically day 25, or in real numbers, a full month today.
Okay.
So I would just like, if there's gaps in my explanation of what I understand happened and transpired months ago, I just beg the indulgence of this body.
And I appreciate it. And I
Okay.
understand.
Thank you,
I
Senator
won't- and I
Frank.
won't hold you to that.
Okay.
So, what is your then understanding of how of the process that they went through to be able to get that US DOE or that federal funding approval?
Well, I'm going to go defer to my good colleague over here, and Frank, and let him explain that.
So, Senator, let me at least provide a little bit of background and answer your first question. At least as we implemented the pay increase to our teachers, that was, like Francis said, that was funded under ARP. And I think I was following the budget sessions earlier, and you were saying some of these teachers didn't receive them, and there's a reason for that. When we implemented that pay process, it was at the tail end of the school year. So as we implemented that, it was the remaining 4 days when it became effective. It became effective May 23rd, 2022. Teachers were paid that final pay period as they ended their school year from May 23rd to May 26th, which is a 4-day gap. So over the summer, they weren't receiving that pay. So again, to answer your question, what was the process and how do we go about this? In order for a fund, as we receive the ARP, in order for us to have access to how we want to use these funds, the former superintendent, John Fernandez, serves as the chief state school officer. In order to draw down these funds, it has to be reasonable, justifiable, and allocable. We sought approval from USED as other districts in the states were providing similar funding to school districts for their teachers' pay. We got that approval from USED, saying that it's okay to push forward. That approval came conditional upon the amounts and the time period. So approximately $10 million was provided to GDOE through the end of the school year up until September 30. So we utilized that funding to do the implementation of a teacher pay raise. And the reason why we were working directly with DOA and leveraging some of that information, again, it goes back to how do we best implement this? What does the pay structure look like, and how can we justify this process? So that process in a pay study looks like something that we can marry ourselves to say, this is how we want to align with reasonably paying our teachers, and this is the expectation. So from the time period of when it became effective to the end of the fiscal year, we're using ARP funds through the authority of the US Ed approval and the authority of the superintendent.
Okay, so, to justify, what documents did you, were submitted to be able to justify a lot of that information?
So I don't know all the specific documents. I think there could have been documents. I can only answer to some of the stuff that I was involved in our discussions. Again, it went down, and the way we took this approach was we had our HR division establish a working committee. They worked hand in hand with DOA, looking at teacher pay, going through teacher 1, 2, 3, 4, looking at the job status, the classification, and what would render reasonable pay. We also looked at how other districts implemented this, and again, the funds provided for, and we were going through the pandemic, we wanted to have an opportunity to, have a retention policy in place, recognize our teachers who were serving in the front line, having to adjust to the different modes of learning, being prepared to not only battle COVID and the pandemic, but being prepared to deliver on the different models of learning that we went through, from face-to-face, online, paper pickup. There was different avenues that our teachers had to go through during the pandemic. The ARP specifically provided that avenue to provide them a funding to keep them employed and retained within the department. We went through a study of the job duties. We looked at different districts of how they were paid. I can share some of that, I just don't have the Wi-Fi. But yes, there was some information gathering and sharing. There was some discussion, and then a final approval as to this is the cost amount, this is the staffing pattern, this is something that the legislature is also included, and you mentioned in the Budget Act, the compensation study. Although we never spent the local funds for that compensation study, there was still workarounds examining what seemed reasonable and feasible for implementation.
It's interesting that you bring about the compensation study, because I gave you a copy of it.
What's the reference to?
There's a copy that I gave to you. It's basically, in the top, it says 8/15/2022. It's a one-pager.
Yes, I'm aware of this, and we've been working through this process. Again, the educator classification, and I'm familiar, and I just got asked this question. We did get an appropriation of $100,000. To date, $75,000 has been released. To date, no expenditures for a study has been. We haven't got a vendor. We haven't done that study. Again, the internal process began with our HR division, going through that with a working committee to establish some of the roles and responsibilities, looking at the teacher pay, examining the classifications, and seeing what they can do internally, and then again having those discussions with DOA.
Okay. Start from the middle paragraph there, or the middle of the paragraph, where it says the final. You see that, Megalan? And the final implementable plan? You see that there?
Yeah.
Can you go ahead and read that out? To the end?
Your reference is to the circle part of this paragraph?
No, just for, yeah.
Okay. The implementation of salary increases due from the said plan shall be effective on June 30, 2023, after receipt of the plan by the Speaker of the Legislature of Guam, unless disapproved or amended.
When did you implement the plan?
So we referenced the plan as a point to support what we wanted to do in terms of allowing use of federal funds. It's not fully implemented. Again, as we went down to this body during our discussion for our budget, we recognized that when we turned in our budget submission, it was absent the full funding and ask of the teacher pay raise. And that's because, again, it was going through that process. So as we got the workaround to work through an implementation, we're doing an ARP funding to bridge the gap from now through September. Full implementation cannot, from a local standpoint, we're coming back to this body and asking for funding support to ensure that there's continuity in making sure that the teachers receive this pay raise and pay hike past September 30.
But what's the implementation date that is said there?
So when it became effective of how we were leveraging our funds, the implementation date from the Appropriation Act here is June 30, 2023.
Next year.
Senator, if I can clarify, the implementation date based on this appropriation act is in line with what should be classified and utilized from our general fund. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily.
So this is an implementation plan for anything that we want to do relative to even our federal funding source where we got the approval
Well,
to
because
create.
eventually that funding source, that plan, that increase, pay increase, is eventually going to go over into the general fund, right?
The intent is to recognize our teacher and our administrative staff for that process. But that process, again, comes with a time consideration of approval. We have $10 million that was approved that comes to term or will be ending by September 30, the end of the fiscal year. So to say that this full implementation of this plan is already in place, it can't be, because as we made the payments, it's going to have to, from October 1st, we will need a secure source of funding to continue this process. Our ARP was a bridge. Again, it was the prior superintendent's mechanism for rewarding and recognizing our teachers, having them paid through the end of the fiscal year.
What was the implementation date of your plan?
It was the pay period from May 23rd to the 26th.
Interesting enough,
Teachers weren't paid until, again, after that. We got the approval, and then teachers weren't paid until after that,
you got the approval from who?
from US Ed for the
Okay.
federal funds.
It's interesting, May 23rd, there's another document that we placed before you. A memo from the Department of Administration dated May 11. Can you go to the last page?
Yes.
Okay, there's a handwritten note there, right above the governor's signature. Can you go ahead and read that out?
It says amendment effective next pay period beginning 5/23/2023 of 20%.
2023, 2022?
Correct.
5/23/2022, right? For 20%. So is that consistent with what you implemented with your ARP funding?
We waited for the approval, and then we processed past the effective date. So again, it was in line with how we could use the federal funds.
Okay.
I can get you the exact date. I don't have it in front of me, but I can tell you the exact date. Again,
Well,
as we came to
I know the exact date. My wife's a teacher, so anyways, I know about that. Okay. So it's interesting that your implementation date, it falls in line with the implementation date basically ordered by the governor, based on something that was supposed to have been following 3654, but from what this body has gathered, we don't have a plan. We don't have a plan in front of us. We don't know what you're talking about with regard to salaries and where the justifications or anything. So how are we going to do this? And how do you justify this? What are you going to tell your teachers past October 1st?
Go ahead.
And again, Senator, that's as we came down to the body and we were going through our budget, we highlighted the needs of the department. The needs of the department was absent the teacher pay adjustments. So in our discussions, as we get towards the budget and we look at this process, if this is going to continue, we're going to need that supplemental appropriation to ensure that there is sufficient funding, and I've been working with Francis to carry this forward throughout the school year.
So you agree with me that, okay, you may request for a supplemental budget because then we're going to have the discussion about how you came about with this plan. You know, it's not going to fit. It's not going to make the budget timeline, is it? Budget's supposed to be done by August 30th.
Repeat your question again, Senator Frank?
Because there is no plan before us, and you may have to request for a supplemental budget to be able to do this. That discussion is also going to have to include a plan, how you implement the plan, and how you intend to implement the plan, as long as the pay scales.
Senator Frank, that'll be your last question.
So
Your time's up. Senator Francis.
I believe, Senator Frank, that again, the original budget submission did not include the pay raises. I think we all understand that. A request was made via GDOE to submit a staffing pattern reflecting the pay adjustments needed for the teacher pay raises. And that amount, we've been working with OFB Senator Joe, arriving at that amount, and we've submitted that. I believe there is a bill that was introduced by Senator Talina Nelson and Joe San Augustine, which can be a vehicle. However, it doesn't have a public hearing, that, requesting a supplemental budget reflecting, as you call it, a pay raise. And if you want to use the other nice word, the implementation of a pay raise. So we understand that. And again, we understand the process. I think we get that part. The question as to what vehicle is going to be used, the proper way that I understand it is that there's now a budget act before this body. You can use that, certainly, because we can fund teacher pay raises as agreed upon by US Ed through September 30th. After September 30th, without the approval of the legislature, the teacher pay raises will stop. We need a vehicle to do it. We need the funding to do it.
Senator Frank, your time's up.
And I think I have every right to be able to respond to that. According to Public Law 3654, we need to plan. There's no plan been submitted.
Thank you, Senator Frank. My colleagues, Senator Pito gave up his time, yielded his time.
Mr. Chair, can I
Yes.
just ask the superintendent and Mr. Kuberners one question, being that they just got here? I did ask Mr. Byrne the question earlier on the pay. Is it okay with you?
You want to ask a question?
Just
Then
one question.
I would end up allowing everybody to ask a
Well,
question.
and I
So
think that would be.
as long
that-
as everybody understands whatever question you're going to ask, it ends. Okay?
So,
As long as we all understand that. Senator Tony?
thank you. Mr. Kuberners, I was asking Mr. Byrne earlier, and you mentioned it, that to bridge the gap between May 23rd to September 30th, that's where you guys had bridged the gap with US DOE on, what was it, $10 million? Can you speak into that?
Yes, that was the approval amount from the request that was sent into US Ed, based again on our staffing pattern and the estimated costs, in line with how we wanted to kind of apply that to the educator pay raise. And
So that $10 million, have all teachers been paid their pay raises from May 23rd on?
I would have to clarify that with HR. As you know, we have over 3,000 employees. Some are new, some are going to be dropping off. If all that's been in the system process that's been paid, that is my understanding. Again, they're only paid for the allowable end of the school year dates when they finished off the year. So if my recollection serves me correctly, as we got the approval and we applied the implementation, it was only a 4-day period as we closed the school year.
Mm-hmm.
What was a differential pay that was applied through the summer was our 12-month administrators. So those amounts were relatively low. And as we approached the opening of school, which just started, again, if my calculations are correct, I think there's a 6-day period where we're looking to further leverage those ARP funds for the differential in the pay. But again, the implementation, coverage, and the payment was for a 4-day window of teachers to end the school year, and that was put on pause as they went through summer break. And as we open the school year, we haven't run that payroll yet. That payroll will cover a 6-day period where we're using federal funds for a gap.
And that will, so all teachers should be paid by September 30th with that bridge gap?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ada. My colleagues just advise, I spoke to Senator Clint, he has no questions. With that, we have completed round 2 of chapter 1. We will now recess, but I will excuse the panel, because we will recess and come back tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and we will start the amendment process for chapter 1. So with that, I ask and I thank the panel for being here today, Ms. Daphne Simzu,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Byrne.
pardon me, before you recess, I just want to ensure that when we move forward, that GDOE will be made available when we discuss GDOE, if we can call them in when we go through the GDOE chapter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so they'll be
Thank you.
available. All right, and Mr. Byrne and Mr. Carlson, Steve, Llewellyn, Superintendent, Mr. Cooper Nurse, thank you. Still good enough, still Superintendent. That being said, we'll recess till tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and we will begin the third round, which is the amendment and comments for Chapter 1.